Hello and welcome. The Taliban says it's protecting Afghan women, but Western forces believe they are liberating them. Are they both wrong? Afghanistan's women are caught in the middle of a battle for rights as the country tries to stand on its own feet after 9 years of occupation. The situation's not helped by security concerns for an already questionable election. Fears of voter intimidation are forcing the closure of hundreds of polling booths before the vote next month. Along with the election, women's rights are seen as a key benchmark for progress in Afghanistan. They do have more of a say, with more than a quarter of the seats in parliament reserved for them, but at the same time, many women are being raped, tortured and killed. Some say a long-term US military presence is necessary to protect their rights, while others argue that women's lives cannot be improved through foreign intervention alone. So today we ask, is the presence of foreign troops in Afghanistan helping or hurting the lives of women there? Remember, you can call in with your questions and comments, and we also welcome your SMS and emails on the show. I'm joined from Kabul now by activist Wajma Frog, who's recipient of the US government's 2009 International Woman of Courage Award for her work on human rights in Afghanistan. She believes the condition of Afghan women hasn't improved much under US occupation. And from Portland, Oregon, we have author Gail Lamont, who believes the international community has had a positive impact on women's rights. She's written the book The Dressmaker of Khair Khanna, about a young Afghan entrepreneur who created jobs for women during the Taliban years. I welcome you both to the show, and Wajma, if I could start with you. The West has been shocked over the past week or so with the cover on the popular Time magazine here in the US, where there is a young Afghan woman with her nose cut off. And I wonder, do you think showing that kind of picture is really hurting or helping the situation of women in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Riz. Actually, I wish the situation of Afghan women was that simple or black and white the way it has been shown in that picture. I feel bad for Aisha, but I think she is lucky to have survived. Just 2 days ago, I'm sure you all have heard that a couple were stoned to death and in a very terrible situation in Kunduz. So I believe that there are hundreds of Afghan women who are going through similar or worse situation in the current situation in Afghanistan, that many of them don't make it to the cover of the Times.
But you know, the interesting thing is that it's almost like a parallel. This picture is like 25 years after the picture taken by Steve McCurry, the National Geographic photographer, who put the picture that became an iconic figure of Afghan women, the Afghan girl as she was known, Sharbat Gullah, who was famous for those green eyes. And that seemed to redefine what Afghanistan was for a lot of people in the West. It was like a positive image showing the sort of amazing features and these amazing people in Afghanistan. And yet this is almost like a sad, dark parody of that. I mean, in that respect, is it helping or hurting the situation when it comes to the image of Afghan people in the West?
I think in the past 9 years, we have used these images as sort of that black and white to show the situation of Afghan women, which is not the reality. I think tying the situation of Afghan women with the presence of the international military in Afghanistan has been one of the biggest mistakes that we did in Afghanistan. The realities of Afghan women, the miseries that they have today, it goes many years beyond even the Taliban, beyond 30 years of war. So I think by showing images as such, we actually detach the social realities that deteriorate the situation of Afghan women on the ground. We actually remove that, the situation of Afghan women from a social perspective, the more from a governance perspective, the more accountability is fading from Afghanistan, the more we see that such acts are happening. So I don't know how much it could help. It might help one person to get her out of Afghanistan, but what happens to the hundreds of Afghan women who go through the same or worse situation on daily basis?
Interesting point you make there, Wajma. Let me bring in Gail Lamont here, and glad to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. Let me ask you about the fact that the US troops have been in there 9 years now. One of the big reasons for the West going in, and particularly America going into Afghanistan, was to stop the kind of abuses that we're still seeing in Afghanistan. When you look at that picture on the cover of Time magazine, should this kind of thing still be happening if the US and Western forces are doing their job in Afghanistan according to their mission?
I'd probably say 2 points. One is that, yes, it was discussed, but certainly it was not the plight of women that led to the U.S. invasion in 2001. Because if it were, it would have happened in 2000 or 1998 or 1999, as Wajma well knows, in terms of the Taliban took Kabul in 1996. So I don't think that you could actually say that that was a real reason for the U.S. invasion. It was clearly the attacks of September 11th. In terms of the Time magazine cover, I actually reported on Bibi Aisha last December for the Daily Beast and have been following her story since. And I think what's lost in the discussion, and I agree with Wajma, that it has been reduced to what you were saying earlier, Riz, a sort of parody of what people think about in Afghanistan. But the truth is that this young woman was able to get help because of a system of shelters that have been created since 2001, that have used the international community space that they have created for women to help other women. And so I think that is part of the story that I think we forget in terms of Afghan women helping other women with support from the international community to get help, whether she stays in Afghanistan or whether she comes to the U.S. Obviously, she's here getting treatment now.
Now, interestingly enough, Gail, there's one view, and perhaps it's a bit far-flung, but at least it's out there, that this image on Time magazine and the kind of negative, or the stories coming out of Afghanistan of the negative treatment, of bad treatment of Afghan women, is a way to essentially justify Western forces remaining in some capacity in Afghanistan, that it's a way to send a message to the people in the West saying we need to be there, that there's a reason why we're out there, and justifying an extended presence there. What's your view on that kind of opinion?
I think that the discussion really with the American public has to go on to really explain and help the American people understand why the U.S. is there. I think that there is no question that women have benefited from the international community's presence in terms of being able to help themselves and help their own families. But whether the U.S. presence has benefited women also depends on where you are in the country and how the security is. And I think that only when the American public understands why it's essential to their own national security that American forces are in Afghanistan will this debate go further. Because I think if you simply say it's a question of women's rights, you will lose the American public, because there are many other places in the world that the American public will ask, well, why aren't we there as well? I think it's really the question of the stability of the region that has to be discussed.
All right, Howard's on the line from the UK. We take our viewer calls on this show as well. So Howard, go ahead. Thanks for being with us.
Yes, hello. 2 points. If the West had been such a regard for women's rights in Afghanistan, we would not have destroyed the only government and society they ever had there that actually respected women's rights, of course, and that was in the 1970s, which basically was a provocation that baited the Soviet Union into invading Afghanistan, because the communist government of Afghanistan didn't conform to the Western ideological construct, and under that communist government, women played a full role. And it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who drew up the mastermind to do 2 things: one, destroy it, and to bait the Soviets into the country. And the other point is that
Howard, well, I need to get a question to one of the ladies, one of the guests.
Well, I'm just going to say that I mean, it's interesting that history seems to be erased.
Okay, that's all right. An interesting point. I'm going to put it to Wajma. That's one of the things that Howard is saying, is that there was a system that did respect women's rights, and essentially the interference of outside forces, particularly in the West, has essentially erased the role that women have traditionally played in having a say in their country.
I think there are 2 points here. One, that talking about the communist regime as a regime that has been protecting the Afghan women. I, as an Afghan woman who used to be very young at that time, I don't believe in that, because the communist regime, the way women was used in the urban settings, became actually the reason for the rural communities, for the rural Afghans to start standing against the government, to start standing against that sort of a central government. I think what we are forgetting, that there's a huge difference between the rural and the urban areas in Afghanistan, and how women are treated in these 2 settings. And on the other point that we are erasing the history, that how women have been playing traditionally, I think that's very important to bring in. And as I said earlier, there are social realities that are attached to Afghan women, and it's not that in the past 9 years we have not made achievements, or I think the situation that the achievements that we made in the past 9 years in Afghanistan is incredible. But for how many is it? I think what has happened is very similar to the history, that we have focused so much on the rural, on the urban women, on the women in the cities, because of the outreach, because of the access, where women in the rural areas are losing space, the public space, even ability to get education. For example, look at our provinces in the very, like Wardak is just 1 hour away from Kabul. Girls used to go to school 4 years ago, but now they are schools are closed even on boys. So the situation, the reality is that the public life is shrinking for Afghan women, and I don't believe that it should be the responsibility of the U.S. forces or international forces, because Afghans too have their own responsibility to protect Afghan women.
I want to get in a call quickly because we're going to take a break in a second, but Hassan's on the line from Sweden, I think. Go ahead, Hassan. Norway, sorry.
I'm from Norway.
Norway, apologies. Go ahead.
My question is, we have seen foreign intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't think any foreign forces can bring stability, neither to the women of Afghanistan or in general the country. So there's no solution. They're better out.
Okay. I'm going to return to your point that you made there, Hassan, after we take the short break, because when we come back, we look at is gender equality even a possibility in a traditionally conservative society such as Afghanistan? Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Even as Afghan women fight for their political rights and civil liberties, can there ever be true equality in a traditionally male-dominated society such as Afghanistan? Discussing those issues with me are activist Wajma Frog, who persuaded many Islamic clerics in Afghanistan to speak out against domestic violence and the abuse of women, and Gail Laman, who's been researching women entrepreneurs in post-conflict economies such as Afghanistan, Bosnia and Rwanda. Let's return to some questions. And Gail, it's back to you. I want to come with Hassan's point about sort of outside influences, and also an email, if I could, that we got from Australia, from Muhammad, who wrote in saying, the sooner the US realizes that a true democratic Afghanistan does not automatically translate to a pro-US government, the better. Now, to what degree is that the issue? Now, you said that, the West needs to know why American forces are out there. Obviously, a lot of people would disagree with you and say it was a constructed environment, that it wasn't necessary for the US to go in for national security. But there's the issue of whether or not the US is, as this viewer is suggesting, trying to equate a government of Afghanistan to something equivalent in the West, and it doesn't necessarily work.
Well, I think it's the same question for women. It's a question of what works with the realities on the ground. I mean, I think it was Hassan's point, but I'm sorry, but the caller right before the break was talking about whether U.S. troops could bring women equality. I don't think that U.S. international, any kind of international troops can bring women equality or women's rights. But I think what is important and what's important to remember is women like Wajma are all over the country advocating for their own rights. And I think it's the space that's created by the presence of the international community that allows them to be there fighting for themselves. I mean, I was at a really remarkable press conference just before the Kabul conference, where women had gathered for 2 days to argue for more representation at the Kabul conference, because both their own government and the international community had largely overlooked them in the run-up to the Kabul conference, which is discussing Afghanistan's future. And women for themselves advocated to both their own government and Stefan de Mistura from the UN and the EU representative that they wanted to be more than token representatives. And they said it for themselves, which is really much more powerful than anything coming from the outside.
Well, Wajma, an email that we got from a viewer by the name of Emmanuel Meles, if I can put this to you. It says, if US troops withdraw on schedule, the Taliban will gain control over Afghanistan. If NATO cares about the welfare of Afghan women, Obama's schedule should be revised. Now, I know that you don't think that the condition of Afghan women has necessarily improved that much under US occupation. What do you expect to happen once those foreign troops withdraw?
Riz, I think if you allow me, I want to just go back a little bit. I think the world is quite impatient with Afghanistan. They think that Afghanistan has been ruined in just 10 years or during the Taliban time. It's not that. We are living under actually a conflict for the past 40 years. The very basic fundamentals of society has been ruined. We have, in the current generation that we have, this is our generation. Whatever they have learned, it's either in refugee camps or behind the mountains resisting the Soviet invasion. So the world needs to understand that in such a society where fundamentals of society are broken, the changes for gender equality might not come in 9 years. Of course, we made, as Gaila also said, like, we are examples of the change for the past 9 years. If the bombing of Afghanistan had not taken place, I wouldn't have been able to speak to you today about the condition of Afghan women. So we have to understand understand that what has taken us so that we have reached to this level. And on the other hand, I want to also say that the presence of international troops is helping the stability to an extent, but this stability should not translate into women's rights or gender equality. For us, the stability of Afghanistan would mean so that this country is able to stop the infiltration of terrorists from its neighboring countries, and at the same time being able to provide security to its citizens. Then it's up to the Afghan people, it's up to the Afghan government to create a space for its women, for its girls to flourish through education, through other access to resources and other political participation. So I don't think it's that easy that in the media we are hearing that women's rights versus the foreign presence. Let's actually, okay. I want to deconstruct this rhetoric which has really framed the debate on Afghan women.
Well, we've got a caller on the line from France. Tamara's in Paris. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I don't think America or anyone else is going to get women their right in Afghanistan. I think women have to fight for their rights. I think they have to harm themselves, whether with guns or knives. They have to come together and protect themselves because no one else is going to do it for them. They keep getting abused and murdered by their husbands, by their sons. Mm-hmm. If America wants to help, I think they need to train these women how to defend themselves physically and mentally. And I think not to promote violence, but it seems that's the only way they're going to get a chance in that society. They need to fight back for themselves.
Well, Gail Lamana, beyond the sort of physical fighting back, as Tamara is talking about, you've been researching, especially through your upcoming book, The Dressmaker of Khair Khanna, the entrepreneurial spirit, which often empowers women in an economic way, which is often a very powerful way, as we've seen in other parts of the world, particularly in South Asia. What did you find in terms of the ability of women to be able to get past those cultural norms and be able to make a serious mark as entrepreneurs and perhaps improve their situation that way?
Well, 2 points. I think, first of all, on the entrepreneurship point, women have been entrepreneurs and teachers and doctors and lawyers and engineers in Afghanistan long before this latest round of international troops were in their country. And my guess is they'll continue to be so long after this latest round of international troops leaves. Afghan women have organized for themselves for years. We're just, I think, are really used to seeing them as victims to be pitied instead of survivors to be respected. And I think in terms of business, what you see now is women, with the help of very supportive fathers, husbands, brothers, uncles, nephews, really working to contribute to their families. Because when you have economic security, you have more stable families. And if you're talking about the security of the region, it really is part of making the society more stable. Maybe just very quickly, if I might, to the caller's point about security.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I had just finished a piece about police women, actually, for the Daily Beast. So what you do see now is women going into the Afghan National Police and Afghan National Army. There's a first round right now of officer candidates in the Afghan National Army. So you do see women wanting to contribute to the security of their own countries and their own communities.
Okay. Ali is on the line from the United Arab Emirates. Ali, go ahead, please.
Hello, Riz Khan.
Hi.
I would like to say that I think putting dark images about the Afghan women and what's happening to them right now, I think it instigates the issue. And what I think is during the Taliban time, I believe that women had some certain rights. And if you look at Islamic teachings, I believe women have rights and men are not allowed to touch women in any certain way. So I believe that the issue should not be interfered by any other international countries, and it should be solved by within.
Ali, let me, that interesting point, let me get it to Wajma and ask, there's the issue, of course, of religion and culture, two separate things, and often they get confused, especially in the West. There is true Islamic teaching and there is cultural values which may not be in accordance sometimes with the religion. Let me ask you on that, and also on the nature of Afghanistan's culture. Could, in such a society, women really have the chance for complete equality, in the sense that it's a particular norm, it's a very male-dominated society?
I wish as Ali asked, that Afghan women had rights during the Taliban. From an Islamic point of view, I think what we are seeing, if people have forgot what happened to women, how they were killed and how they were tortured or socially banned during that time, we could not forget what happened 2 days ago, like how a couple without any sort of a process, that how were they guilty, were they not guilty, how their guilt was proved, they they were stoned to death. And even after the man had survived the stone, then he was killed through a bullet. So in our society, getting back to the issue of culture and religion, that's true. Like, we are a culturally religious society, but it's also important that in our society we need to understand that, like, the majority are illiterate. So whatever is the preaching or the lessons that is being given by the religious clerics and the religious mullahs, people accept that. And the thing is that if we want to change the way women are being treated in Afghanistan, that's through the Islamic way. It is very important that women's real Islamic rights are accepted. Going to school is an Islamic right. Like, being able to go and seek assistance from health assistant, this is an Islamic right. Being able, like, our Prophet's wife was an entrepreneur. So I think we don't see those sorts of Islamic rights that should be given to women in Afghanistan. So what is actually happening, that, as you said, it is a male-dominated society, but at the same time, the culture is very much dominated by a masculine interpretation of religion that we are seeing in Afghanistan.
Gail, a final word with just about 20 seconds to go. In the sense of the way women have been progressing, do you expect a movement forward, or are we likely to be seeing some more terrible stories coming out of Afghanistan?
I think it depends on what happens. It remains an open question. I think it does depend on whether the international community has the patience that Wajma is talking about in terms of letting Afghans take over their own security, which everybody wants to do, and allowing them the space to really advocate for themselves. Well,
Gail Aman and Wajma Froga, I want to thank you both for being with us and contributing to the debate. Thanks. And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter. We'll keep you notified on upcoming shows, and you can send us questions and comments to pose to our guests. On the next show, Digging for the Truth. He's witnessed history unfold and shaped the direction of world events through his reporting. Veteran journalist John Pilger talks about making leaders accountable and why, for example, he thinks British Prime Minister Tony Blair should be in court. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.